The year was 1977. After years of hard work, some great albums, a couple lineup changes, Lynyrd Skynyrd was the band that they had always dreamt of being from back in the late 60s. They had a great guitar player that had just joined the band, Steve Gaines, who not only was a great guitar player, he was also a good singer and songwriter. Artemis Pyle had been with the band for a while, taking up the drums when Ed Burns left the band, and the band members themselves were finally starting to clean up their act as Gary Rossington, one of the guitar players, and Alan Collins had both been in serious car accidents. Ronnie Van Zant, the singer, had realized that he needed to clean up his act because he had just had a child. So in 1977, it looked like things were going great. Things couldn't have been better for this band. They were also on a very profitable tour where they were the headliners, and in October of that year, their newest album, their greatest album of all, Street Survivors, was going to be released. The tour was in the midst of going on. The singles had been doing well, and so therefore things looked great. This album itself was supposed to be their peak. Unfortunately, it became their swan song. In today's episode of Musical Memories, I will discuss Lynyrd Skynyrd's Street Survivors.
So let's get talking about the album itself. Now, the album clocked in at 35 minutes and 26 seconds, and it had 8 total tracks. On side 1, you had What's Your Name, That Smell, One More Time, and I Know a Little. On side 2, you had You Got That Right, I Never Dreamed, Honky Tonk, Nighttime Man, and Ain't No Good Life. Now, the album itself did very well. It actually peaked at number 5 on the charts, and the 3 singles that came off the album were What's Your Name, That Smell, and You Got That Right. At this time, Lynyrd Skynyrd had lost their third guitar player, Ed King, and they needed a third guitar player, as Skynyrd was always well known for having 3 guitar players. Well, one of the background singers, Cassie Gaines, told them, I have a brother who's a heck of a guitar player. I think he'd fit right in with you guys. And turns out he fit in really well. He already knew all the songs, and he had written some really cool songs himself, and he was a heck of a singer. So he fit right in with Lynyrd Skynyrd. Now let's discuss the songs themselves from the album. Now, What's Your Name, of course, was the first single, and this became one of Skynyrd's biggest hits, as it went, I believe, up to the top 10 on the charts, if I'm not mistaken. The second track, That Smell, was an interesting song because of the fact that it discussed the evils of drugs and alcohol, as the band members themselves were learning that this was not a good thing, as a couple of them had been in some serious car accidents. And part of the reason Ed King would say in later interviews as to why he left Skynyrd had to do with the drugs and the partying and all that stuff. The third track, One More Time, was actually an old track. This was not recorded for this album. It was actually recorded in 1971. So some of the later members, like Steve Gaines, Leon Wilkerson, the bass player, and Artemis Pyle, were not featured on this track. It was actually Ed King on guitar, Greg Walker on bass, and Ricky Medlock on the drums. The reason this old song was actually used is because 2 of the original tracks that were recorded for this album were dropped, that being Georgia Peaches and Sweet Little Missy, which I found kind of strange, as I liked both those songs. However, they weren't totally lost, as they were B-sides, and you could actually find them on a compilation album called Legend. The final track on the first side is got to be one of my all-time favorite Skynyrd songs, and hell, I'll even say one of my all-time favorite songs, period, and that is I Know a Little. That was written exclusively by Steve Gaines before he joined Skynyrd. It's a really fun instrument. It's got a really cool instrumental beginning of the guitar picking. It's been featured in several TV shows, commercials, movies. It's a really great song. And the interesting part about it is that this song was not even a single. However, it is played on quite a few classic rock stations. And the later band members have always said that nobody has been able to replicate Steve Gaines' guitar playing during the intro. Now, the first song on the second side is the third single, and that is You Got That Right. What's interesting about this song is that it was written by Steve Gaines and Ronnie Van Zant, the band's frontman, and they actually shared lead vocals on this song. Really a great song, and in a way it's kind of sad because they talk about, the future, and for the most part, unfortunately, the band thought the future looked really, really great, at this time, and looking back on this song, it, is kind of sad, actually. All right, it's very sad. The next track, I Never Dreamed, was another cool song written by Steve Gaines and Ronnie Van Zant. This is kind of one of those sad, rockin' songs, though, where he talks about, somebody leaving him, kind of, a typical, almost like a country-esque song. While not a single-worthy song, it's still a pretty cool song that you're not going to want to skip. Next track is Honky Tonk Nighttime Man. Now, this song is interesting because it was actually a cover tune, something Skynyrd very rarely did. Occasionally they did a couple covers like Crossroads and T for Texas, but this one was a song originally written by Merle Haggard. Now, on the reissue of this album, they actually have like an outtake where Ronnie Van Zant adds a little bit of a line to the song where it says Honky Tonk Nighttime Man. He kind of says Jacksonville Kid, and they actually believe that was the last thing he ever said in any recordings. And again, that is available on the re-released version, I believe, from 2001. The final track on this album is Ain't No Good Life, which was written by Steve Gaines, and he handled the lead vocals, being the first time that someone other than Ronnie Van Zant got to sing lead on a Skynyrd track. What some people may not realize is that Steve Gaines actually recorded a solo album with his old band before he joined Skynyrd. This album is called One in the Sun. Now, the track One in the Sun is actually available on the Skynyrd album Legend, and this album, One in the Sun, actually got released many years after Steve Gaines' death. If you don't own it or haven't heard it, get it. It's a great album.
Of course, we can't talk about Street Survivors without talking about the plane crash that ended Lynyrd Skynyrd for that time period. So let's talk about that terrible day in rock and roll history.
On October 20th, 1977, at approximately 6:52 p.m., the Convair CV-240 passenger aircraft ran out of fuel and crashed in a wooded area near Gillsburg, Mississippi. The band was actually on their way from Greenville, South Carolina, to a concert in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. As a result of the crash, 6 people died. The lead singer, Ronnie Van Zant, new guitarist, Steve Gaines, assistant tour manager, Dean Kilpatrick, the pilot, Walter McCreevy, and co-pilot, William Gray, all died on impact. Backup singer Cassie Gaines actually died a little while later as she bled to death. Billy Powell said in an interview that they didn't tell her that Steven had died, hoping that against hope that she would survive, but she actually died in Billy Powell's arms before help could arrive. The cause of the crash has been listed as fuel exhaustion due to pilot error. It has also been said that a few of the members of the band actually had a premonition that this was going to happen. Lacey Van Zant, the father of Ronnie Van Zant, had said in interviews that Ronnie had told him that he would not live to see 30. You can actually go to the crash site, as a beautiful memorial has been set up right there. Fans from all over the world visit it every year. Interestingly enough, if you purchased the album Street Survivors back then, a tour itinerary sheet was included with the album, and it's really kind of sad and hard to look at sometimes and see what was coming next, as they would not be able to complete the tour, of course. And the band themselves did regroup and continue on, but that's a story for another day.
After the plane crash had occurred, the cover became quite controversial, and because, as you can see by looking at it, that Stephen Gaines was in the center and seemed to have been engulfed in the most flames. his widow had asked that the cover be changed. So the albums were recalled, and the back cover became the front cover. Many years later, when the album was reissued on CD and was reissued in vinyl, this is the original, though, from 1977, the original cover was restored. Even though the story behind Street Survivors is a tragic and a sad one, we are left with a few thoughts. One, this was probably one of the greatest albums, if not the greatest album Lynyrd Skynyrd ever made and ever would make. And it leaves us with wondering, what could have came next? I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I really enjoyed making it for you. If you did, please give me a great big thumbs up. Subscribe at the bottom if you haven't already by now. And please let me know in the comments section if you feel what you feel about this album. What kind of memories or emotions does it give you? I'd really like to hear your stories about your memories of Street Survivors and of Lynyrd Skynyrd themselves.
In our next video, I'm going to be discussing one of my all-time favorite albums, Boston's debut album, so you will not want to miss that.
Well, until next time, this has been Anthony Gamer. Thanks for stopping by, and I will see you all in the next episode. Until then, have yourselves a great day and rock on. Goodbye.